Hello, everyone, and thank you, Becky. I'm going to be surprised about the work that I show today because I also feel that my children, also in this room, they don't know what I do either, so I think that's going to be a surprise for them as well. But I think before I start this, I want to say a big thank you to Becky for actually making this happen. And all our staff and volunteers as well, because it takes an incredible amount of work. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Salkin Type, Fenner Paper, the Fleet Street Quarter, and the Winkle-Dewar Society as well, because their contributions make a difference to actually allow this all to happen, both in person and online. I hope you get used to the applause because I'm going to do this quite a lot during the presentation. And last but not least, to all of you here on a Saturday. So, they say when you start these talks, you should really give the punchline early. So it's going to be about duality, boundaries, and play. So that's basically the gist of the presentation. Not much more that you need to have in mind in this. And what I'll be talking about in more detail is a universal truth that I think we see the world, but also how I see the world and my experiences that have shaped how I've come here. And a lot of it will be playful, at least for me, very playful. So let's just jump right in. So whenever we start, we always think about the boundaries and how you bump into them. And I think, just now, how I was introduced both my work and a bit about my personal life. There's that duality of it. Yes, so I'm CEO at Made by On, a digital product agency, but I'm also the chair of the St. Bride Foundation. In my personal life, I'm an addict for saunas and cold plunge dips as well. So that's a bit about me. But again, that's often how you would introduce yourselves at a party or to meet someone. But very much those are very blurry boundaries sometimes. It's so hard to sort of have concrete definitions of people, but we do like putting people in boxes. I think throughout my career, it's always been quite hard. And my designer and my technologist and my speaker don't really know. And I think also it's okay to not know, but I think the world around us puts us in boxes and therefore makes it easier for others. So this duality, it's all around us. It defines our world in ways that we don't always notice. There's this aspect of light, dark, of order, of chaos, of magic and logic. These are opposing forces. They're separate, but also they coexist, they interact. And in that interaction, there's also something truly remarkable that happens as well within that tension. So today, in this journey that we go through, I will take you through some spaces where this duality exists in the work that I've done, but also through my company, and where we've been collectively. It's a journey through boundaries, what we always, sometimes think they're solid and they're unbreakable, these boundaries, but between the real and the digital, between the past and the future, the logical and the magical, we'll visit that. But every journey begins with a line, and sometimes we know where it starts, sometimes we don't know where it ends, sometimes we don't know. And often you don't see the boundaries until you bump into them. So the journey for myself is this refugee camp in Hong Kong. So my parents immigrated from Vietnam and escaped Vietnam to Hong Kong. My grandfather, he was a doctor, and he had thought it would be a good idea as a doctor, apparently, to help save the lives of people. I think that's what you do as a doctor. So he had helped save the lives of both Americans and of the Vietnamese. And he was put in prison because of that, and he died in prison during that time. So my family, at that point, it was quite political for many reasons. So they decided to escape on small little boats all the way to Hong Kong. So I grew up in this refugee camp in Hong Kong when it was part of the British Empire. So already my landscape is being formed even without much of my choice or anything that I'm doing myself. And for me, as I was growing up, we left Hong Kong to the UK. And identity for me is an interesting aspect when it comes to identity and culture. How do I define myself? So I became British officially when I was 9 years old. I'd lived around, I think I moved to the UK when I was about 5, 6 years old. And we'd moved around the UK. I'd lived in various hostels, and we finally made it to London. But for me, it was whenever I was talking to people, am I Vietnamese, am I British? I was honestly stateless for my time until I became British, so I couldn't really have any real attachment. But again, how I grew up at home was very different to what I might be saying in school as well. So there was always that tension in that duality for me. And growing up, I really struggled in school. I was never that bright, and I'm still not very bright, but the colours are the brightest thing I was growing up, essentially. And it still stays to this day. I like my yellow trainers that you might notice if you're in the room. And I think it became very clear to me in the education system is they are invisible lines that you start bumping into, especially when I started trying to go through the education system and understand actually what am I learning, how am I learning it, why am I behind my peers. And that's a boundary that shaped who I have ended up being, and still to this day shapes me further. And also from a physical point of view, I'd mentioned growing up in various hostels, and finally, with great luck, we ended up in a council estate here, and it was here where I got to be jumping around different flats from various friends in the area. It no longer exists, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it. But I got to see culture and got to see how different people had interacted, lived, and for me, there was lots of fun growing up here, but at the same time, there were aspects of borders that I didn't choose, and how that perception also shapes how people would look at me as well. And interestingly on that, I ended up going to a secondary school that Channel 4 did a documentary called, I think, Dispatches, and there was an undercover school teacher in there documenting what's happening. And it was, I'd say the picture was painted in a way whereby it was one of the worst schools in London, and there was lots of violence, and there was lots of talking. I think the talking aspect was probably down to me than the violence aspect. I was always told off for talking quite a lot. I'm not sure why, but I was always sent into detention because I just wanted to express my mind, basically. But in any case, it's quite interesting, this article, whereby already how people were painting the school and the students, they were defining actually what those boundaries were for me as well. And I had no say or choice in the matter. And as I became older, wiser, one might say, maybe, I started thinking about, well, what happens if you move beyond the boundaries, and where is there growth for oneself? And I started to question those lines and also question how do you unlearn that sort of upbringing as well? And what do you keep with that? So one of the things for me that is a very pointed moment in my career was LCC. So I went to LCC, and it's probably the only university that would actually have me, and I'll come to that in a bit. My parents really wanted me to be a doctor. I'm not sure why. I don't think they learnt their lessons either, but they were like, you should become a doctor, so I was studying very hard for that. And I ended up failing. It's quite funny. I now run a technology company primarily, and I failed all my ICTs. I couldn't study computer science. I didn't have enough A-levels to actually go to the university I wanted to go to. So for me, that was quite disappointing at that point, that sense of failure. But then what was either my lucky break or just me being a naughty boy that I was always talking, and I was always doing things with my friends. I was always trying to bring a community together. I was always designing things and using technology to bring people together. in a very early time. I was probably spending more time on the computer than outside in the playground, and I probably still do to this day. But in any case, what that allowed me to have was this portfolio, and this portfolio that I could present to LCC and submit to the LCC, and they ended up accepting me. And it's here where I learned my love for education, for design, and also following my passion as well. But that wasn't also very clear to me at that time. But over time, it did become very clear to me as I was there. And the thing also, being a very poor student and from a family with not much means, was that I had to be working whilst being a student in various design agencies at the same time, which was incredibly helpful for me in many ways, not only from a financial point of view, but also from the point of view of gaining experience and my network, which we'll come to. So after I left LCC, I worked at various design agencies, and I was always put in a box. I was either a designer or technologist, and I couldn't be both. These days, you call it a creative technologist. And for me, it was an interesting point whereby I just couldn't find myself. So I ended up having a midlife crisis when I was in my 20s. And then I was like, do you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I was terrible at school, but I'll go back to school anyway. So I went to do my master's at UCL, studying, this time not in the arts, because I was like, do you know what? The arts has failed me. I'm going to go do the sciences. I studied a degree human-computer interaction, studying the psychology and the methodologies to really understand how we design technologies for people. I ended up being on the dean's list and top 5% of the faculty. So again, a lot of that was just me having fun and just playing with a lot of the research and the ideas that I was having at the time about how we could push research forward, combining design and technology. And I loved being a student so much, especially going to the pub at 11 a.m. And no one looking down on you for that. So I was like, well, let's do a PhD as well. That's not the only reason I thought doing a PhD was a good idea, but it was a good reason. Instead of going to the pub at 11 a.m., I could go to the pub to like 9 a.m., so that was even better. But fortunately, at UCL, they had provided me a scholarship on my academic merit to work with Great Ormond Street Hospital to develop new technologies for children to improve their well-being. And I don't know if any of you remember this, but there was this very small thing, I can't remember what it's called, it escapes me, COVID, basically. So this thing called COVID makes it really hard to do research, apparently, with children in the hospitals. I'm not sure why. In any case, I had this bright idea at the time because I had some time on my hands to pick up the phone, and because my phone was literally blowing up at this time, and people were talking to me about digital projects. Again, from lots of consultancy work I'd done, picked up the phone with various people, got a team together, and we started Made by On in its current guise. And so I founded it with 2 other partners, and we have some amazing team members in this room as well, I'd like to say. And at this moment in time, for me, it was about bringing some of that knowledge together, but also thinking about what different narratives could we build for a product agency, and also where do the borders and identities blur as well with the work that we do. So our work, there's a theme of duality that when I reflect upon our work, is that every project sits at this intersection between 2 forces, magic and logic. Magic, in this case, it's very much the wild, the untethered energy that comes with brainstorming issues, imagining possibilities, and thinking beyond the limits of what we have now. But we've been doing this for big and small clients, whether you're Live Nation, whether you're a small design agency, whether you're Ernest Young trying to create games to recruit talented individuals, or whether you're the RCA wanting to represent data in new ways to showcase what's happening with the sea level rises and global warming. So not only do we touch upon that aspect of the magic, but also logic and the structure, the strategies, the processes that turn those ideas into something real and tangible. So it's always the combination of the two. And that's it's the interplay that drives our work. And it's the tension between the chaotic, the structured, that brings out most of the creative solutions that we found. And I've learned it's never about choosing between magic and logic. It's about how they dance together. Too much magic and you never get anything done. Too much logic and you lose the spark. I don't get much work done anyway. But anyway, it's about finding that balance and allowing yourself to play between two forces to create something meaningful. And this project here, Bhutan, I should go back. I had a phone call about this project, and Julian, our brand strategist partner who worked with us on this, he says, I've got this project. It's for a small country, and you'll be working with the king and the kingdom of Bhutan. I was like, yeah, we do that all the time. We work with kings and countries. He's like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. The timeline's a bit tight as well. I'm like, every client says that, and there's always some flex. I'm like, what's the timeline? You've got about 3 months to do it. I was like, yeah, sure, we can achieve this. And my assumption was that a lot more of the work had moved on. But the next day, I picked up the Financial Times, and I saw the exact date that Julian had mentioned to me. I think he got the press release out before the work was done. So in any case, I really knew that the deadline was immovable. And what was magical about this project in many ways was that because the brand strategy and the thinking was happening at the same time as we were doing the digital work, we were looking at the country, looking at the beautiful vistas and thinking about how could we see the country in new ways. So we built these maps, and one of the things that they said, we'd want a map, and we were just like, okay, great, we'll make a map. They're like, yeah, Google Maps is fine. We're like, no, let's play around, and we ended up getting satellite data, population data, light data, all combining it to then start building up our own models of understanding. So we presented this tool to the tourism board, and they were quite amazed about the first time seeing their country seen as a digital twin, and asking us what more data could we add in there. So having a better understanding of the geography. It also allowed them to engage with the project in a playful way as well. And the king loved it, so nothing else matters, really, at this point. And we started to create these beautiful vistas and these illustrative pieces. For those who don't know, Bhutan, whilst they are, I think, one of the happiest, if not the happiest country on the happiness index, they're also quite a poor country as well. So you can be happy and poor, clearly, but one of the things is they couldn't afford to send around drones and have fancy photo shoots. So this tool allowed them to start having the fabric or the visualizations as part of editorial content. So not only cost effective, but also really empowering them to see and blend a rich sense of both magic and logic together. Now, when we allow and enter the creative process, we allow these blurred lines between these forces. I find that really exciting. We often experiment, we fail, we try again. And I think that's where the best ideas live, between magic and logic. And it's been an important part of my work and the work that we do at Made by On. But now I'd love to talk a bit about time and space. And those are the two forces that also constantly shape us. So the St. Bride Foundation, founded in 1891. I've learnt that now. And you're all here in this fantastic foundation, and I'm very humbled about being chair, and we'll see if Becky, as our amazing deputy chair, will agree or not, but it's definitely been a really exciting, energizing, but also a time whereby opening an aperture has been interesting for me, because actually to understand how we open up the aperture, I had to go back in time to understand, well, where have we been? So sometimes when I walk through these walls, it feels like this place exists where time feels suspended, especially if we're in this hall. I mean, not much has changed from this. Yes, the chairs are somewhat plastic now, but again, one might say there's not been much investment in this hall because it's been designed in such a great way. But sometimes I imagine when I'm here the echo of the old printing machines through the walls, and there's something quite beautiful about it. But also, the library is a key facet of helping us with our collection and being a great vessel for it. And also, for my own education, so for those who don't know, and I didn't know this myself, so LCC used to be called London College of Printing, and then before that it was actually spun out of the library from these four walls as well. So actually I owe a lot of my career to this very place, so it's quite interesting to come full circle. Here, fortunately, you don't have to do that much composing, but back then there was lots of composition happening. You can still try your luck downstairs at the workshop. I think I'm terrible at it, to be honest, but it's quite nice just imagining and seeing this, but also seeing how much it's influenced our design work at this very moment in time as well. And for those who fancy going to theatre in a bit, there is a theatre show happening this evening, because we have a theatre on top of a swimming pool. So we used to have a swimming pool. It's still there, just without the water, and there's a theatre on top of it. And very much, not only was the St. Bride Foundation founded for the aspect of the print industry, but also to bring the community together and create provisions for those who were poor in the area and who couldn't afford to have baths. So there were lots of members who would use our facilities to also simply be clean as well. And I think these simple things are quite an empowering aspect of the foundation, and it's always been about community. This quote sticks with me. The brilliant summer, the reduced price of admission, the extended dressing accommodation, and later on, the crystal clearness of the water. Over 28,000 people paid for admission. So the water would get changed, I think, once a week. So basically, you'd want to go when it gets changed, and then it was crystal clear. During the end of the week, you probably wouldn't want to go in there, basically. And there are some spectacular pieces in our collection. We house the largest type specimen collection in the world, but also house some really old items. Whenever this is shown to our guests on tour, it's one of our oldest pieces, I get a bit frightened around it. A, because it's called Book of the Dead, and whenever I watch movies about Book of the Dead, that's never a good sign, seeing things like this, honestly. But at the same time, I don't want to be responsible for something like this going astray. So yeah, there's this interesting aspect of duality of time and preserving the past at the St. Bride Foundation, but also, at the same time, it's about embracing the future as well, and that's what keeps the St. Bride Foundation relevant today, and why you're all here as well. And it's this space, this building, and it's this physical manifestation of that. So I'll be getting the new poster up for my next speech, but yes, again, it's this constant evolution and bringing people here that makes things come to life. And you know, we're all very much inspired by the weight of history and the possibilities of the future, literally the weight, especially with these. But when I reflect upon history, sometimes I also think about, well, there's the time before, but also where we're going next. So when I look at the typewriter, for instance, we have a few in this building. I also think about my this thing that I've seen before, whereby looking at a typewriter, this piece here, give orange, me give eat orange, me eat orange, give me eat orange, give me you. So that's the best thing that I've written for a long time. But that was actually written by Nimp the chimp on a typewriter. So that's the longest piece of type written by a chimp. And to this day, I've not managed to write beyond those many lines either. Interestingly, with typewriters, Apple, in a memo, I'm not sure if they wrote this on a typewriter, though, which would be quite interesting to find out. But essentially, a memo went out to be effective immediately. We're banning typewriters, no more typewriters, because we've just invented the word processor. That is the future. Let's get rid of typewriters. Again, I still wonder how this was written. But in any case, Apple's coming in with Apple intelligence. So no longer artificial intelligence, but Apple intelligence, very much Apple-esque. But also, they've moved into this world with this. They've integrated ChatGPT seamlessly, whatever that means. I think it means to help us communicate and write faster. So basically, something like this. I would call this the duality of productivity and creativity. Now, I think in the world that we're in now, there's this tension, right? There's this tension of AI. We can't really escape it for better or worse. And as you've seen in my career, it's always evolved, it's ebbed, and it's flowed, and there's been blurred boundaries, and I've learned and unlearned those boundaries. So I thought, let's do the same with AI as well. So the first thing I do, I Wikipedia artificial intelligence, and I read it. It's quite a dire entry. I would not recommend it, unless you want to fall asleep. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to be smart about this. Let me ask ChatGPT, teach me about AI. Again, it's the most dire piece of text I've written, or read, I should say. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to be even more modern. I'm going to use YouTube, like all the cool kids. So how to use AI for creative work. So 7 AI tools that will make you rich. And then I've got how AI is transforming the creative industries by The Economist. Clearly, the algorithm says more about me than the search results. But in any case, now with all this data and all this information, I feel like I can put it to good use. I feel like I've now become an expert and almost at one with the machine as well. That's just living and breathing the fabric of artificial intelligence, and now being able to really see things like Neo in the Matrix. So as we go through with this knowledge and this thinking and this sense of play with time and allowing the past and future to interact, I think we open up spaces for creativity. And the St. Bride Foundation is about creating those spaces where time isn't a boundary, but a playground. But then what happens when we start blurring those lines of duality, and what happens when the boundaries between tradition, innovation, magic and logic, time and space start to dissolve? We find new possibilities. We create something that didn't exist before. So, as I mentioned before, I think it was quite interesting to see this. You could almost get a sense of the fabric of what was happening. But actually, could you feel the fabric? And here now, by seeing and feeling it, using tools to bring this to life, it helps you imagine in new ways. So AI can be a disruptor, an enabler, but also it can be something that allows us to play with the history. Again, with the composition room, are there ways that we can see this in new ways as well? Again, is it perfect? No. Is it going to replace jobs? No. But does it allow you to enter and blur the boundaries with creativity and technology? Yes. And our lovely swimming pool as well. Again, these tools now are very powerful to allow us to open up the aperture. And for me, I spent many hours last night. Again, I have to be very apologetic. Becky gave me the deadline a couple months ago. I gave her the deck probably this afternoon, so I was definitely spending too much time making these vignettes. So this is on top of our swimming pool, actually. So in the winter months, we would have a gymnasium on top of swimming pool. But again, already seeing how you could be in such a space. And I think that's an incredible use of technology and blurring those boundaries. So this duality, it's a source of tension between creativity and efficiency, and essentially between work and play. But it can also be a source of inspiration. It forces us to question the lines that we've been taught to follow and invite us to play with the unknown. In that play, we discover that boundaries aren't walls, they're doorways to something greater. So in the work that we do at Made by Young, to the role of the St. Bride Foundation, using education and bringing people together, like today. And my own personal journey, all of it is built on this idea that duality isn't something to avoid, it's something to embrace, because it's in those blurred spaces, in those playful interactions between opposites, where we discover what's truly possible. So, as you move forward in your own work, your own lives, think about the lines you follow, the boundaries you've accepted, and ask yourself, what would happen if you let them blur. What would happen is if you create and allow yourself the time to play in those in-between spaces. So thank you for your time today.